Welcome to the deep dive. If you've been feeling lately like things are just fundamentally shifting, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed,
Yeah.
you're definitely not alone. There's this real sense of urgency, kind of big, sweeping changes happening. And honestly, trying to figure it all out, it can feel like standing in a storm.
Mhm. And that's exactly why we're here today. We want to try and cut through some of that noise,
Right.
take a deep breath, sort of, and figure out, where are we as a country right now? And for this deep dive, we're pulling insights straight from a really fascinating, long conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Senator Bernie Sanders talking on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Okay. That's a great source. Because you just don't get those long-form talks much anymore, do you? Everything's sound bites.
Exactly. 7 seconds here, a headline there.
Yeah.
But it was a chance to really dig in,
Yeah.
let the issues breathe.
Yeah, explore them properly.
So our goal today is to pull out the most important nuggets, the key takeaways from that whole discussion.
Yeah.
Got to give you a shortcut to being, really informed on these huge issues.
Okay, sounds good. So what are we talking about? What are the big themes?
Well, Sanders lays out some pretty stark stuff. We're talking massive wealth inequality, a healthcare system he says is just broken, the crazy influence of money in politics.
Okay.
And then there's technology and automation, the good, the bad, the kind of surprising impacts on society. Get ready for some moments that might make you, sit up and think.
All right, let's dive in. So this idea of a pivotal moment, Sanders starts right there, doesn't he?
He does, straight out of the gate. His thesis is basically, look, America is facing crises more serious than any time in modern history.
Yeah.
Like, really serious.
Wow.
He calls it a pivotal moment. Says the choices we make right now, they're going to shape life for our kids, grandkids, future generations.
And he feels like we're not really talking about it, at least not in the mainstream.
Exactly. That's what he finds striking, that this big picture conversation, where are we actually heading, it just gets drowned out.
So what's his core worry then? What's underneath that?
It really boils down to wealth and power, the concentration of it. He says, look, he believes in democracy, believes everyone deserves a decent shot at a good life. Simple as that.
A fundamental idea.
But the system we have now, he's blunt. He says it's not working. It's broken, especially for, regular people just trying to get by.
And I guess that feeling resonates, right? That feeling of being overloaded with information, but maybe not getting the deep dive.
Totally. He actually praises longer conversations like the one he was having with Rogan because they allow for that depth. They let you unpack the complexity. He's basically saying, hey, we got to talk about the cracks in the foundation before the whole thing crumbles.
Okay, so foundational cracks. Let's talk specifics. He gets into the wealth and income gap, right? And the numbers are, well, there's something else.
Oh, they really are. They kind of stop you in your tracks. Get this. One person, Elon Musk, apparently has more wealth than the bottom 52% of American families
Yeah.
combined.
Wait, say that again? 52%.
52%. One guy versus more than half the country's families. Just let that sink in for a second.
That's hard to even picture. It's not just a gap, that's a chasm.
It really is.
Yeah.
And there's more. The top 1%, they now own more wealth than the bottom 93%.
93. Wow.
It paints this picture, right? Like the tiny cap on a huge pyramid. And then there's the CEO pay thing.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about this.
CEOs making, on average, 350 times what their average worker makes. 350 times.
It's not just that the rich are getting richer. It sounds like everyone else is sort of treading water, or worse, even with productivity going up.
That's exactly his point. These aren't just numbers on a page. They show this massive imbalance. It touches everything.
And he connects this big picture stuff right down to everyday life, doesn't he? The paycheck-to-paycheck reality.
Absolutely. He says 60%, 6 out of 10 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And he talks about this very personally, said his family grew up that way.
Right, so he gets the stress.
He really emphasizes the daily struggle, the constant worry. How do you feed the kids? Rent costs are off the charts, he says. Healthcare costs, forget about it.
And the fear of just one thing going wrong, like the car breaking down.
Exactly. He mentions that.
Yeah.
If you don't have, say, $1,000 saved up, which many don't, a broken car isn't just an inconvenience. It could mean losing your job if you can't get there.
Yeah.
Your whole life can unravel.
That 60% figure it's huge. And he compares it to how things used to be.
He does. He's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, there have always been rich and poor. But he says it's worse now. The gap is worse.
Yeah.
He looks back to maybe the 50s or 60s
Okay.
and says back then, often one worker, maybe just with a high school diploma, could support a whole family, own a home, have a decent retirement lined up.
That feels like a different world now for a lot of people.
Completely. And this comparison leads him straight to arguing the system isn't just unbalanced by accident. He argues it's actively rigged against working people.
Okay, rigged. That's a strong word. How does he say that happened? How did we get here?
He points to decades of what he calls systematic attacks on the working class. A big piece of it, he argues, are these horrific trade agreements.
Like NAFTA and things like that.
Exactly. Agreements that basically made it easy, even encouraged, corporate America to ship millions of good-paying jobs, manufacturing service jobs overseas, to low-wage countries like China, Mexico.
Leaving American workers behind.
Thrown out on the street, basically.
Yeah.
He tells this really vivid story from like 25 or 30 years ago. He visited the Maquiladora zone in northern Mexico.
Right, the factories near the border.
Yeah. And what he saw was, well, disturbing. Brand new, shiny factories. But right outside, the workers were literally living in cardboard boxes, making like 25 cents an hour.
25 cents, good grief.
The stark image, right? Exploitation over there directly linked to job losses and communities getting hollowed out back home.
So what's driving that? Why would companies do that?
Pure greed, that's what he calls it. The prevailing religion of the oligarchs and the corporate world. It's not just about profit. It's about maximizing it, no matter the human cost. Families, communities, doesn't matter.
And it feels less personal now, maybe? Like decisions are made far away?
That's a huge part of it. Companies owned by other companies, by massive Wall Street firms. Your local boss might say, hey, sorry, my hands are tied. Decision comes from corporate, way up high.
So there's no accountability, really.
Diffused responsibility, he calls it. Nobody seems to genuinely care because the ultimate owner is some global entity that doesn't even know these workers exist. And this ties into the vanishing safety net, too.
Like pensions.
Exactly. Defined benefit pensions, the kind that guaranteed you an income in retirement. They've systematically disappeared, replaced by things like 401k, which put all the risk on the worker.
And the result.
Shocking, really.
Yeah.
He says about half of older workers in America have nothing in the bank for retirement, nothing, after working their whole lives.
That's terrifying. That shift from personal connection to impersonal corporations. You see that same dynamic in healthcare too, right? That focus on profit over people.
Oh, absolutely. He asks this rhetorical question, basically. Anybody out there think this healthcare system is actually working?
And the answer is pretty much a universal no, isn't it?
Pretty much. It's this area of just widespread frustration. He tells this anecdote, and it's pretty chilling, actually.
What is it?
He mentions hearing about people celebrating when a United Healthcare executive was assassinated. Now, obviously, that's horrific, terrible. But he uses it to show the sheer depth of the anger, the rage people feel towards these insurance companies.
Because the perception is they just deny care.
That's how he frames their business model. It's built on denial. The more I can deny you, he says, the more money I make. That corporate logic puts profits squarely ahead of patients needing care. People pay premiums for years, then when they need help.
They hit a wall.
Exactly. They struggle, they fight. Sometimes they just can't get the care they paid for and desperately need.
And the human cost of that system, it must be immense.
It's staggering. He says 85 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured.
Underinsured, meaning they have insurance, but it's just not good enough when something serious happens.
Right. High deductibles, loopholes, things not covered. And the direct consequence, thousands die every year just because they can't afford the care they need. It's tragic.
And meanwhile, costs just keep going up and up.
Out of control.
Yeah.
He mentions Vermont, his state. Premiums and expenses rising 10, 15% a year. Families can't keep up. Businesses can't keep up. It's unsustainable and, he argues, profoundly unjust.
So what's the alternative he proposes?
It's fundamental for him. Healthcare is a human right, period. Not a privilege you get if you have the right job or enough money.
And that's different from most other developed countries.
Completely different. He points out the U.S. is basically alone among major countries in not guaranteeing healthcare as a right for everybody.
How does he suggest we think about that?
He uses this great analogy. Think about fire departments or public schools.
Yeah.
We don't ask if you can afford the fire truck when your house is burning down, right? We all chip in through taxes, and everyone benefits from that safety net. Same with schools, libraries.
So why not healthcare?
Exactly. Why treat healthcare like a commodity you buy instead of a public good, a societal responsibility?
That makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. But even if we agreed on that, do we have enough doctors and nurses to provide that care?
That's a huge piece of the puzzle. He highlights this critical shortage we have across the board. Not enough doctors, Nurses, dentists, mental health folks, pharmacists, you name it.
Why? Why aren't people going into these fields?
A major barrier, he argues, is the insane cost of education. Medical school can cost up to $500,000. Nursing school, maybe 150 grand.
Wow. So you come out with crippling debt.
Crippling debt. It actively discourages talented, caring people from even considering these professions. The system basically punishes you for wanting to help people.
So his solution would be
Pretty straightforward. Fits his whole philosophy. Subsidize it. Make medical and nursing school affordable. Maybe even free, like it is in some other countries.
like Germany or Scandinavia?
Yeah. Treat it as an investment in public health for everyone, not just an individual's burden. Get rid of that financial barrier. You get more doctors, more nurses, more dentists.
What you need if you're going to guarantee care for everyone.
Exactly. It's about building the workforce needed to actually deliver on that promise of health care as a right.
Okay, so we've talked economics, we've talked healthcare. What about the political system itself? Sanders goes after campaign finance pretty hard, right? Calls it corrupt.
Oh, yeah. No minced words there. He calls the system corrupt.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is he thinks almost everyone agrees on that, regardless of politics.
Like left, right, center, everyone sees the problem.
Pretty much. He senses this widespread feeling that the way we fund campaigns is just fundamentally broken.
So what's the core of that corruption, in his view?
He points the finger squarely at the Citizens United Supreme Court decision from, 15, 16 years ago now?
Right, the money is speech decision.
Exactly. That decision, he argues, was maybe the worst ever. It basically said spending money on politics is freedom of expression, which in practice gave billionaires and corporations a constitutional right to pour unlimited cash, millions, hundreds of millions into campaigns.
So it just opened the floodgates for big money.
Completely. Unleashed this torrent of dark money, super PACs, tilted the whole playing field, made it almost impossible for regular people or candidates without deep pockets to compete.
And we see that influence playing out.
Clearly. He gives examples. Elon Musk reportedly spending like $270 million to help Trump.
Wow.
And it's not just one side. He mentions the Harris campaign getting something like $1.5 billion over just a few months.
$1.5 billion.
Yeah. And the point isn't just the amount, it's the implication. These huge donations, they're not just civic duty, they're investments.
Yeah.
Buying access, buying influence, shaping policy. It creates this reward system.
Which must put politicians in a really tough spot, right? The cost of conscience, you mentioned.
Exactly. He talks about political suicide. The fear politicians have of being primaried, challenged from within their own party if they step out of line.
Out of line with the party or out of line with the donors?
Both, but especially the powerful donors and the super PICs. He gives this hypothetical. Imagine a Republican from a poor district. Maybe they want to vote against tax cuts for billionaires or against cutting Medicaid.
Because it would hurt their constituents.
Right. But Sanders says that politician would be finished. The swarm, he calls it, the attack ads, the funded challengers would come for them relentlessly.
And that's not just hypothetical. He gives real examples.
He does. He mentions Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, faced a primary challenge, backed by Trump, just for opposing war with Iran, an issue where public opinion might actually be with Massie.
And on the Democratic side?
He talks about Israel, how voting against the Netanyahu government or questioning U.S. military aid is often seen as political suicide. Why? Because of powerful groups like AIPAC, pouring huge money into elections to support certain policies.
Even if there's widespread concern about, say, civilian suffering in Gaza.
Exactly. The political calculation driven by money can override constituent concerns or even basic humanitarian principles. It puts politicians in this bind.
So the bigger picture is that this system, fueled by money, doesn't really reflect what people want.
That's his core argument. On both sides, he says, this system rejects the will of the American people and ultimately serves powerful special interests. He senses this deep, cross-partisan dissatisfaction with politics as usual. People are looking for something different.
Which maybe explains why he gets crowds in conservative states on his Fighting Oligarchy tour. People connecting on economic frustration.
That's what he suggests. Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas. Big crowds, enthusiastic crowds. It points to this potential common ground, this shared feeling of being left behind by the system that cuts across the usual red-blue divide.
Okay, so if the problem is big money corrupting the system, what's the fix? What does Sanders propose?
His main solution is pretty bold. Public funding of elections.
Public funding, how would that work?
The basic idea is to get around Citizens United. Give candidates a way to run without needing billionaire donors or super PACs. They'd get public funds instead.
So they wouldn't be beholden to special interests.
Exactly. He points to New York City as a place that already does something like this. Candidates can opt into a public funding system if they agree to limits on private fundraising. Small donations from regular people get matched with public money.
So it amplifies the voice of small donors.
Right. It makes it viable to run a campaign based on grassroots support, not giant checks. It forces this debate. Do we want elections funded by taxpayers with accountability to the public, or controlled by billionaires with accountability to them?
And his answer is pretty clear.
Very clear. He argues taxpayer funding is way better than the current system, which he basically sees as legalized bribery. It's about reclaiming who the political process actually serves.
It's a fundamental shift, putting power back with the voters, not the donors. Okay, let's pivot slightly. Technology, another huge force reshaping things. And Sanders sees a real paradox here, doesn't he?
Oh, a massive paradox. It's kind of mind-bending when you think about it. Look at the last, say, 50 years. Technology has exploded, right?
Unbelievably. Computers, automation, robots, the internet.
Worker productivity has shot up because of all this stuff. We can make more things faster and more efficiently. Logically, you'd think, okay, wages should be going up too. People are producing more value.
Right. You'd expect everyone to be better off sharing in that increased wealth.
Exactly. But here's the kicker Sanders points out.
Mm-hmm.
Real wages, what your money actually buys after inflation, are actually lower now than 52 years ago. Lower.
Lower. Despite all that productivity increase, how is that even possible?
He calls it a massive transfer of wealth. From the bottom 90% basically, straight to the top 1%. The benefits of all this incredible technology, they haven't been shared. They've been concentrated at the very top.
So progress hasn't really meant progress for the average working person's bank account?
Not in terms of real purchasing power, no. It fundamentally changes how you think about progress. He mentioned this poll.
Yeah.
Ask people, are you better off than someone like you 40 years ago?
Yeah.
And yeah, people acknowledge the cool tech, smartphones, big TVs, easier travel, better medicine.
Sure, the gadgets are better.
Right. But despite all that, most people felt the overall situation is worse. Why? A big reason, he says, is economics. It's basically impossible now for one person to support a family.
Unlike in the past.
Right. Rent eats up 40–50% of income in many places. You need two incomes, often both parents working long hours, just to tread water. That creates this underlying anxiety, this insecurity, even with all the cool tech.
So what's the point of the tech then if it doesn't make life fundamentally better or easier for most people? He connects this to the minimum wage too, right?
Directly. He calls the federal minimum wage $7.25 an hour just ridiculous. He asks, how can anyone possibly survive on that? Or even $10, $13 an hour, let alone raise kids?
It seems impossible in most places.
It is. He pushes for $17 an hour federally. Admits even that's tough in expensive areas, but it's a start, a step towards dignity. His argument is, boosting the minimum wage is one direct way to make sure that increased productivity actually benefits the workers creating the wealth, not just the owners.
Okay, so there's the economic side of tech, but there are social costs too, right? He talks about loneliness.
Yeah, this is really interesting. He calls it an epidemic of loneliness in America. Alongside really high rates of mental illness, suicide, drug addiction, he asks this simple, powerful question, why?
Why? When we're supposedly more connected than ever.
Exactly. That's the paradox. He draws a direct line to technology. Constant online interaction, constant exposure to every problem in the world, 24/7. He says it creates massive anxiety, especially for young people growing up in this.
And social media plays a big role.
Huge. He points to studies linking it to increased self-harm, suicide risk, depression, anxiety, particularly among young girls. The constant comparison, the pressure for perfection.
It's brutal, and it affects learning too.
Seems like it. He says teachers report attention spans are greatly diminished. And then there's the worry about AI, like ChatGPT. Can students just generate essays now without actually learning or thinking critically? It's not just about cheating, it's about potentially losing fundamental skills.
This isn't just theory, though. The displacement of workers by tech, by AI, that's happening now, isn't it?
It is. He says he's seen ads from AI companies literally saying, don't hire humans.
Wow, that's blunt.
Right. From a purely cold corporate view, machines have advantages. They don't get sick, don't need breaks, work 204/7. So the big question becomes, what happens to us, to society, when huge numbers of human jobs just disappear or become cheaper to do with machine?
Which jobs are feeling it first?
Truck drivers, taxi drivers, Uber drivers. Autonomous vehicles are coming fast. He mentioned the Waymo driverless cars in Austin. People use them, but sometimes people attack them too.
Attack them, why?
Calls it ICE riots. Sees them as symbols of this force taking away human jobs, human agency. The enemy of the human being, he said some see it as.
And factories, too, fully
He
automated.
gave an example of a coal factory in China. Runs 247, almost zero humans involved, just machines. It shows a future where even complex manual labor could become obsolete.
Scary stuff. And it won't stop at manual labor, will it?
That's his warning. The real wave, he thinks, is when automation starts hitting white-collar jobs hard, jobs we tend to think are safe.
So, if tech takes away the jobs, what happens to people? Not just financially, but psychologically. This is where the meaning crisis comes in.
Exactly. This is maybe the deepest question he raises. For so many of us, work isn't just a paycheck. It's tied up with our identity, our purpose, our feeling of contributing. I matter because I do this.
So what happens when that's gone? For millions.
What fills that void?
Yeah.
He mentions things like UBI, universal basic income, to make sure people can survive. He talks about his own childhood experience with food stamps, welfare.
Yeah.
Basic safety nets are crucial.
But survival isn't the same as purpose.
Not at all. And this is where he flags a really dystopian risk. AI companions. Companies literally saying, we got a machine friend for you. She really loves you.
Oh, that's creepy.
He calls it so dystopian. Tells the story about a guy proposing to his AI companion, crying when she said yes. Sanders' reaction, we're done, we're cooked. It's this terrifying vision of fake relationships replacing real human connection.
Yikes. Okay, so faced with all this, the economic fallout, the social anxiety, the potential meaning crisis, what are the solutions? How do we steer this technology thing in a better direction?
Fundamentally, he says, decisions about technology, how it's developed, how it's used, shouldn't be left to a handful of CEOs chasing profits. It needs to be a societal decision made by the American people.
Technology should serve us, not the other way around.
Right. It should improve human life, free us up, not just make a few people richer while displacing millions.
So what does that look like practically?
One big idea he pushes is using the productivity gains from automation to shorten the work week. A 32-hour, 4-day week with no loss in pay.
Like the UAW has been talking about.
Exactly. Sean Fain at the UAW is a big proponent. The idea is, let's take the benefits of working smarter, faster, thanks to tech, and give people more time back. Time for family, friends, learning, hobbies, reducing that chronic stress of working crazy hours just to survive.
That makes sense. Share the benefits. What else?
Decouple the basics from your job. Healthcare, education.
Yeah.
Make them human rights. So if you lose your job to automation, you don't also lose your life-saving insulin or your kid's chance to go to college or your home.
A real safety net reduces that terror of job loss.
Absolutely. It provides fundamental security. And then look at where the wealth generated by technology goes. He points to Norway.
Norway, what do they do?
They have this massive wealth fund, like $1.7 trillion, built from their publicly owned oil resources.
Yeah.
And they use the profits to provide a super high standard of living for everyone. Free healthcare, free education.
So a model for using collective wealth, whether from oil or from AI, for the public good.
Exactly. Imagine if the immense profits from automation were channeled into things like that, ensuring everyone benefits. Now, this doesn't magically solve the meaning crisis.
Right, you still need purpose.
But it creates the foundation. He acknowledges we'll need to find different meaning in life if work isn't central anymore. Shift from dirty, dangerous work to maybe more creative, community-focused, emotionally satisfying things, learning, exploring, connecting. He emphasizes the need for humans to cling to each other, build stronger communities.
Connection becomes even more important. Okay, shifting gears again slightly, but still connected. Let's talk about health in a broader sense, our physical health. Sanders draws a link between our healthcare spending and our food.
He does. He points out this huge, glaring paradox. America spends more on healthcare than anyone else, by far. Yet we're among the sickest populations in the developed world.
How does food fit into that?
It goes right after the big food manufacturers. Compares them directly to tobacco companies.
Whoa. How so?
He says they know. They know their products packed with sugar, processed junk are causing massive rates of obesity, diabetes, especially in kids. They engineer these foods to be addictive, just like tobacco companies engineered cigarettes. Profit over health, period.
And we don't even really know what we're eating.
Because the labeling is terrible. He calls it ridiculous. Like listing sugar in grams. How many people know what 30 grams of sugar actually means in teaspoons? It doesn't help you make informed choices.
So solution number one, honest labeling.
Yes. clear, simple, honest labeling, so parents know what they're giving their kids. Beyond that, he's passionate about rebuilding local agriculture.
Getting away from big corporate farms.
Exactly. Promoting family farms, organic methods, regenerative agriculture. He thinks that leads to healthier food, obviously, but also stronger communities. Bringing back farming as a respected way of life, connecting people to where their food comes from.
That focus on community and investing in people, it seems to run through everything he talks about. Childcare, housing.
Huge issues. He calls the childcare situation a disaster. Costs are insane. $20,000 a year in Vermont, he mentioned. This hits families hard financially, but more importantly, it impacts kids during their most crucial developmental years, 0 to 4.
Hinders their start in life.
Absolutely. And then housing. He contrasts today with the past. Rent used to be maybe 18% of income. Now, often 40, 50%. Forces both parents to work, leaves no breathing room, no savings.
And the combined effect of all this poor diet, stress, lack of access, unaffordable basics, it shows up in our health outcomes.
Starkly. Life expectancy. We're lagging behind almost every other major country. 4 years shorter on average. And for working class folks, it's 7 years shorter than for the wealthiest 1%.
7 years? That's shocking. A profound indictment, like he says.
It really is. So when he talks about making America great again, his version is about investing in people, have the best educated workforce in the world, making college, trade school accessible, maybe free, like in Scandinavia or Germany. Treat education as an investment, not a debt trap.
It all connects back to empowering regular people, doesn't it? Getting involved politically.
That's the through line. He urges people, get involved, make demands on government that it serves you, not just the very wealthy. He also champions things like worker ownership.
Companies owned by employees.
Yeah, he mentions examples in Vermont, says they work great. Workers have real sense of purpose. They're more productive, less absenteeism, because they have a stake in it. It challenges that whole corporate power structure.
And underlying it all is this basic principle.
You can't poison our children. Simple as that. Corporations can make money, sure, but not by destroying public health, not by damaging the environment, not by exploiting workers. There have to be limits.
So the vision is use tech to work less, guarantee a decent standard of living for everyone, free people from basic survival worries, and let human potential flourish.
That's the bold vision, yeah. A society focused on well-being, not just GDP.
But achieving any of that requires a functioning democracy. And he sees threats there too, right? Beyond just money and politics. Talk about authoritarianism.
He does express real concern there. He points specifically to former President Trump's pattern of suing media outlets, CBS, ABC, Meta, even the Des Moines Register over a poll he didn't like, threatening judges.
He sees that as intimidation.
Absolutely. An attempt to intimidate media, silence criticism, suppress dissent. Even if the lawsuits fail, he argues, they have a chilling effect.
How so?
They cost a fortune to fight. Media outlets, especially smaller ones, might just shy away from tough reporting if they fear getting buried in legal fees. It makes them hesitant.
So it undermines the free press, even without winning in court.
Exactly. He stresses how vital a free press is, even when they make mistakes or have biases. The answer, he says, is public debate, factual correction, not lawsuits from the powerful trying to shut them up. Though he does acknowledge media is very divided now, reinforcing our bubbles, makes real dialogue harder.
It seems like everything is pushing us apart. But Sanders still believes in finding common ground in our shared humanity.
He really does. Despite all the division, all the noise, he actually gives a nod to podcasts like this one for allowing longer, deeper talks than those 7-second sound bites, helping people actually think about things.
And underneath the politics, he thinks most people want the same basic things.
Fundamentally, yes. Better lives for their families, good health, good education, safe communities, freedom from harm. He believes most Americans agree on those core goals, even if they disagree on how to get there.
And his tour in conservative states kind of proved that point, maybe? That people can unite on economic issues.
That's the hope he holds out, that shared struggles can bridge the ideological gap. He also looks back at history. Remembers being arrested in '63 fighting housing segregation. Points to the huge progress made on civil rights, women's rights, gay rights.
Progress is possible even when it seems impossible.
Right. Despite ongoing bigotry, despite politicians trying to divide us with hate based on ignorance and fear, which he calls stupid, progress can happen. We're not doomed to division.
And that unity isn't just important domestically, is it? He talks about global challenges.
Crucial globally. He says flat out, the planet's survival depends on bringing the world together, not feeling hate. We face existential threats that don't care about borders.
Like nuclear war, Pandemics.
Exactly. Thermonuclear war is still a real danger. Pandemics. He briefly touched on the debate around gain-of-function research, those experiments that can make viruses more dangerous. It's a complex issue with global implications for biosecurity.
And climate change, of course.
Absolutely. He's clear.
Hmm.
It's not a hoax. It's real. It's global. Yes, China's a major polluter now, but the U.S. has historical responsibility too. The point is, we have to cooperate internationally. He pushes back against attempts to derail action by confusing it with other issues like 15-minute cities or carbon taxes. The core issue is physics. We're part of nature, wage war on nature, and we lose. The urgency is immense.
Wow, okay. We have covered an incredible amount of ground here, really digging into that Sanders conversation.
We really have. Our goal was to take all those complex, heavy issues, inequality, healthcare, politics, tech, and distill them down into the key insights, the core arguments, the proposed solutions. Make it digestible for you.
And we heard a perspective that sees a system fundamentally tilted, rigged, against ordinary people, driven by concentrated power and wealth.
But also, importantly, we heard a vision for how things could be different. Bold ideas, healthcare and education as rights, publicly funded elections, using technology to benefit everyone, not just a few, a 4-day work week.
Right. A focus on well-being, community, shared prosperity.
And as we wrap up, maybe the biggest thing to chew on, especially thinking about the future with AI and automation accelerating, it leaves us with this really profound question. For you, for all of us.
Okay, what is?
If we do manage to create a society where basic needs are met, housing, food, healthcare, through things like UBI or stronger safety nets, and if technology does free up huge amounts of human time from traditional labor, how do we then redefine meaning and purpose? If work isn't the main thing anymore, what fills that space? What new ways will we find to contribute, to connect, to feel fulfilled? How do we prepare ourselves emotionally, socially, for that kind of potentially massive shift in what it means to live a meaningful life?
That's a huge question. What does contribution look like beyond a 9 to 5? What does community look like?
Definitely something to mull over.